I have good news today, and it's rare that I've had good financial news for the program, but I do have good news today. Earlier this week, we talked about this new fee structure that Patreon rolled out, and Patreon, of course, is this platform that we use to raise money. You can pledge any amount of money that you want on a monthly basis. You can pledge $1, 10, 100, 1,000, $100,000 if you wanted. Nobody's done that, but you could conceivably. I think it would work. I think the system would allow that. Nobody's tried, to the best of my knowledge. And what happened about 5-6 days ago is that Patreon announced that they would be changing the fee structure. So when you make a pledge of $5 to Patreon, we don't get the full $5. There's a fee that's involved there, and it depends on the size of the pledge and a couple of other factors. And what Patreon announced earlier this week is that they were going to be shifting the burden of that fee partially towards the donors in a way that really wasn't good. It wasn't a good idea, and to compound the disaster of that, their messaging around it was also terrible. Unfortunately, it was really bad for us. We lost over 150 or even close to 200 donors who were understandably upset with the announcement from Patreon. That I told you about on Monday. Later in the week, I told you that there was glee on YouTube from haters, as we highlighted on the program, thrilled that we were losing money and had lost nearly 200 patrons. I highlighted some of those comments yesterday. Followed by really good news, which is that Patreon posted a blog post yesterday and emailed creators deciding that they are not going to make these changes. They titled their blog post, "We messed up, we're sorry, and we're not rolling out the fee changes." This is a very good thing. I'm glad that Patreon has made this decision. And part of it is because people were canceling their pledges. Patreon clearly saw, wow, we made this announcement and all of our creators are starting to lose pledges, and that's a bad thing for them. And obviously it's bad for Patreon's business as well. Now, my concern is, Pat, people see the article and they never see the correction, right? With newspapers, this is often the thing. Big article in a newspaper that ends up being something really bad. And then 5 days later on page 12, the newspaper puts out a correction and nobody sees it because they're either furious with the newspaper and they're no longer getting it anymore, or they never read to page 12.
Right, especially if they sign up for Patreon, right, and they get their newsletter, and then when they pull their support, they don't get that newsletter anymore, they don't see the update.
That's my concern, that the people who are still patrons were notified that Patreon has canceled this fee change. But the people who canceled their support are no longer receiving emails from Patreon, and therefore they would have absolutely no idea about it. So I'm here to tell you, the changes are canceled. Please come back and restart those pledges. And to make it extra enticing, I want to remind you, we have this Patreon goal. And you can see this at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. When we reach 2,250 patrons, we are going to record, edit, and upload a multi-part critical thinking mini-series. Initially, it will be distributed to patrons, and then eventually it will get full distribution on YouTube. This is a really, really good mini-series we've been working on for a while. I actually have for you today to provide some extra incentive to prove that we're working on this. I'm going to show you the possible introduction that producer Noah Ferguson has put together for this video series. And I get it that if you're listening on the podcast or the radio, you're not going to see it. We are moving well ahead with this, and people will see that we've already got graphics. It looks really cool. We're developing a whole look for these. I believe that this is going to be one of the coolest things and most well-produced things that we do. It will be a 12 to 15 part mini-series all about critical thinking. The Patreon fee has been rolled back. The fee surge is done. Let's get to 2,250 patrons, help us recover, and then we'll continue working on this critical thinking mini-series, which I think is going to be absolutely fantastic. So patreon.com/David Pakman Show. You won. They canceled the fee surge. Now let's get those pledges restarted.